Hey, so today we're headed out to Sblendorio Vineyard. We wanted to check on the status of the Chardonnay. So we're going to go out and do a vineyard walk and discuss the logistics of harvest. We're going to go see where we are and what John and I have to do to get ready.
All right, hi. My name is Sblend Sblendorio, and I'm the owner of Sblendorio Estate and Vineyard in Livermore, California. We bought this property in 1995. We planted the vineyard in 3 years, 96, 97, and 98. And over the years, things have been replanted. In fact, every year we go through a process of trying to replant vines that die or maybe they're diseased. Well, the amount of work involved depends on the time of the year. Sometimes it's very intense, and some weeks you won't do anything. People ask, well, when's the busiest time? There are busy times like when you harvest. So we're going to harvest Chardonnay hopefully in a few days. That'll be a very intense, but it's about 6, 7, 8 hours. You're harvesting all the grapes at one time and delivering them all at one time. Same thing when we harvest the red grapes, and maybe a few weeks from now. It'll be very intense for a few hours, and then it's over. But in terms of the busiest time, I believe it's the winter time. The winter time is when you're looking through the vineyard, you're trying to figure out what's disease, what you want to replace, you're killing weeds, you're fixing the trellis system, which supports the vineyard. I think that's the busiest time. And the thing we're trying to do, we started this past year, is try to become certified organic, and that takes a few years to do, but you have to start. And mostly it involves a couple of different things, and that is what you spray for mildew and for insects, and what you do to kill weeds. I had always pretty much been organic when it comes to the insect and the mildew problems. The chemicals I've used are certified organic. However, the weeds are a challenge and a half. So some of the systems that go into a vineyard, obviously people look that it grows on a vine, but the vine has to be supported by a trellis system, and usually people use metal or wood to support because otherwise a grapevine would just grow along the ground, and it makes it hard in order to harvest them if they're along the ground. So that's why you want to elevate it. And there's other good reasons why you want to do that. Then you have to irrigate it. In certain parts of the world, not in California, you can depend upon rainfall in the summertime. We can't here in California. So we might have water, but we need to get it to the vineyard. So either by some sort of canal system or a well or some other system, it's conveyed to the vineyard, and then you distribute that through an irrigation system. Most irrigation systems are using drip, which means it's a long plastic tube that delivers a smaller amount of water than other alternatives. And hopefully what I do is I monitor it almost weekly as to put the right amount of water every week, depending on the time of season and how much is needed by the vine. And if you notice, the Chardonnay actually has bird netting on it. I do not net the Zinfandel. Let me tell you why I net the Chardonnay. We have a lot of trees around here. We have telephone wires and electrical wires. The birds at a certain time of the year, normally blackbirds, come in, and I haven't seen a lot yet, but they come in and they will devour a vineyard. Now, if you have 200 acres, then you can let the birds eat around the edges and you're not too concerned. But when you only have an acre and a half, I don't want to lose everything. So we have historically netted the Chardonnay because that's when the blackbirds come in, about the same time as they ripen. The Zinfandel ripens a few weeks later. For whatever reason, the blackbirds leave, and we lose a little bit on the edges or where there's trees or where there's wires that they can launch from and get the grape, but we tend to not lose too much except around just the corners or the edges. So how do you know when it's time to harvest? I like to be collaborative in that regard. There are certain technical measurements It's chemistry that winemakers use and grape growers use to measure, and so that's kind of a starting point for me. But so this morning I took a reading for the Chardonnay, and we're measuring sugar content, because sugar, when you ferment the grapes, will turn into alcohol and also produce flavors that you all consumers appreciate in wine. So that's just one. We also look at pH. We also look at what that's called total acidity, and that all helps the winemaker figure out if it's a good time or not such a good time to harvest the grapes. But like I said, I do it collaboratively, because I try to talk to all the winemakers that I sell to and let them know what's going on and tell them to come out and take a look, taste. But we've come over the last several years to where we look at the numbers, the chemistry, but it's really about taste. Does it taste like it'll turn into good wine? And that just takes talking to people, having the winemakers taste themselves, and having me get experience doing that. We have, over the last few years, we've gone to only harvesting at night. And the reason we harvest at night, and we don't do them by machine. Well, there's a tractor that carries the bins back and forth, the grapes back and forth out from the vineyard, but it's all hand harvested. And they're harvested very gently into what they call a half-ton picking bins, or in the trade they're called macro bins, or big plastic bins. And the reason we do it at night is because that's when they're cool, and that's when the winemakers much prefer the grapes to show up in their winery. So the idea is if they start picking around 10ish, maybe they're done 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then by 8 a.m. the grapes are already on the loading dock of the winery, and they can start processing in the coolest part of the day.
So we came out here today to do some sampling, do some testing. There are 2 ways that we kind of determine when we want to pick. One is by taste. Taste to us determines kind of everything, whether the flavors are there, whether it's had enough hang time. The other way is using this little gizmo. It's called the refractometer. It tests individual berries' sugar content. So what you do is you take the cluster and you squeeze the juice onto the platform here, the dish. You close it. It's got a way that allows light through, and so what happens is that the light refracts through, and there's a scale inside that tells you approximately what the sugar is. So the sugar is reading 21.3, 21.2, somewhere in that range. This is a great way to tell you if the grapes are getting ripe, but what Sblend usually does is he takes a whole sample, individual berries randomly picked throughout the vineyard, takes them back, crushes them, drains the juice off, and then puts them in a hydrometer. And by putting them in a hydrometer, you're getting a random sample across the whole vineyard that will allow you to tell how potentially ripe the vineyard is. You never know until you physically pick it and run tests on the juice that you have. But this gives us a good example that they are 22, 23. I believe he said today his sample was reading at 23 and a half, 23.3, somewhere in that range. So that's the range that we're looking to pick this and get it for pressing. Well, that's a Dijon. It's a little bit more minerally, a little bit more. I'm not quite sure what the terminology is, but yeah, I mean it's not your roundness, typical roundness. It's just got some nice back flavors.
The ones in the back with the shade, the lighter green, real high acid. The yellow, the ones that are more yellow, a lot more fruit.
He's got some eucalyptus around here, so you
I'm
get
not
that.
picking up any of that.
Yeah, you don't get that terroir of eucalyptus around here.
Yeah. No, I'm not picking that up at all.
Nice flavors. I mean, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
I mean, other than being too warm, I'd be happy with him picking it tomorrow or this week, and you can make some good wine.
They truly are hot.
So this is going to be for Arroyo, right? Okay. So I do want to commend that you have an excellent management team and an excellent winemaking team that has been around the Livermore Valley for many years. They are experienced, but they also have a certain knack to figure out where the grapes should come from, what to do with them, because they've just been around long enough. They've understood. They've made a lot of great wine over the years, and you all should be lucky that you're drinking wine made by some really excellent winemaking people.